Hi everyone, in this video lecture we will cover the muscular tissue. Muscle tissue is characterized by properties that allow movement. Muscle cells are excitable, that means that they respond to a stimulus. They are contractile, meaning they can shorten and generate a pulling force. When they are attached between two movable objects, in other words, bones, contractions of the muscles are going to cause the bones to move. Some muscle movement is going to be voluntary, which means it is under conscious control. For example, if you decide to open a book and read a chapter on anatomy, that's something that you have control over. Other movements are involuntary, meaning they're not under conscious control, such as contraction of your pupil, for example, when you go out in the sunlight. Muscle tissue is classified into three types according to structure and function. They are the skeletal, the cardiac, and the smooth muscles, which we will cover on the next slides. Here we have the three different types of muscle tissue: the skeletal, the smooth, and the cardiac. Skeletal muscle is going to be attached to bones, and its contraction is going to make possible for locomotion, also facial expression, posture, for example, and other voluntary movements of the body. 45% of your body mass is made up of skeletal muscle. Therefore, skeletal muscles are going to generate heat as a byproduct of their contraction, and thus they're going to participate in thermal homeostasis. Shivering is going to be an involuntary contraction of skeletal muscles in response to these perceived lower than normal body temperatures. The muscle cell or myocytes are going to develop from myoblasts, which derived from the mesoderm. And we already went over some of this when we talked about the connective tissue. Myocytes and their numbers remain relatively constant throughout life. Under light microscope, the muscle cells are going to appear striated with many nuclei that are going to be squeezed along the membranes. The striation is going to be due to the regular alternation of contractile proteins that are actin and myosin, which we already talked about as well. Smooth muscle tissue contraction is going to be responsible for involuntary movements in the internal organs. It forms the contractile component of the digestive, the urinary, and the reproductive system, as well as airways and arteries. Each of these cells is a spindle shape with a single nucleus and no visible striation. That's why it's called a smooth muscle, because it does not have striation. In contrast, cardiac muscle forms the contractile walls of the heart. The cells of cardiac muscles are known as cardiomyocytes, and they also appear striated under microscope, so they appear similar to the skeletal muscle. But unlike the skeletal muscle fibers, cardiomyocytes are single cells that are typically with a single centrally located nucleus. A principal characteristic of the cardiomyocytes is that they contract on their own intrinsic rhythms without any external stimulation. They are able to do this because cardiomyocytes, they are attached to one another with specialized cell junctions that are called intercalated discs. And we can see the intercalated discs right over here, which are going to have both an anchoring junction and a gap junction. Another thing that we can notice from the cardiac muscle is that the cells, they branch out. So they're not long and thin and cylindrical, they do branch out. The function of the cardiac muscle is to pump blood through the body, and this is under involuntary control, meaning that we don't have to think about the blood pumping through the heart. So that's great, right? Here are examples of each of the muscle tissues. First, the skeletal. You can see that we're going to have the biceps brachii as an example. It will be attached to bones, and that way when they contract, They will move the body. In the middle, we have the cardiac, which represents the heart, which is, like I said, important to pump the blood through the body. And last, we have the smooth muscle, which will normally form or be present in organs. And in this example, we have the stomach.